The story begins with footage from a wedding as our main characters are newlyweds, and they are heading to Hawaii for their honeymoon. Their names are Cliff and Cydney Anderson and have been together for a number of years now, but just recently decided to tie the knot. The first thing they do when they get to the Hawaiian Islands is go take a helicopter tour, and they see a trail they want to hike in the coming days. Cliff and Cydney book a 3-day rental car excursion through the jungle where they plan on seeing everything that Hawaii has to offer. As they are driving to the takeoff spot, they see a couple that is hitchhiking, and whenever they pull over to check on them, the other guy can sense that Cliff is hesitant to give them a ride, and the guy angrily says never mind, and to keep driving, which scares Cliff and Cydney because they think he might have some anger management issues. They arrive at the trail takeoff spot and begin their 11-mile hike through the forest. Not too far into the trail do they meet another guy named Nick that helps them cross a scary cliff point overlooking the ocean. Cydney and Cliff walk with Nick for a little bit and get to know him and where he's from. Nick is very interested in Cliff once he finds out that Cliff is a big Hollywood screenwriter, and Nick tells Cliff he has been thinking about pursuing an acting career. The three of them then run into a group of girls who are freaking out because they just found out a newlywed couple on the island had just been murdered the day before, and they want to get off of the trail as fast as possible. Cliff and Cydney consider going back, but then decide to continue with the hike because it is their honeymoon and they aren't letting some lunatic out there ruin it. Nick takes the couple to a nearby waterfall that he had found earlier, and he introduces them to his girlfriend, Gina. They all then go skinny dipping together except Cliff as he goes and researches more on the murders that happened because he is a little freaked out and scared by it all. Cliff then reads that it is a man and a woman that committed the murders, and then all of a sudden Kale and his wife Cleo show up behind him. Kale and Cleo were the couple that were hitchhiking earlier and Cliff thought had anger management issues. Cliff has his suspicions that Kale and Cleo may be the killers. Cliff tells them he doesn't want any problems, and he heads back to the waterfall where Cydney, Gina, and Nick are. Gina then asks Cydney and Cliff if they want to tackle the rest of the trail together tonight and hang out with each other, and they both agree to it. Cliff is then looking in his bag for their trail permits, but he cannot find them anywhere, and they will need them if they were to get stopped by security or the police. They then start back on the trail and are looking to get as much of the trail done as they can before it gets dark, and they have to set up camp. Nick also tells Cliff how he is a veteran and has plenty of stories of him being a badass, and Cliff is relieved to hear this just in case they need protecting from Kale and Cleo. Cliff and Cydney take a break while the others keep walking, and Cliff shows Cydney the picture of the killers that has been released, but the picture is rather dark, and she tells him it could be anybody. Cliff starts suspecting that maybe the killers are Nick and Gina, as he is a decorated war veteran and would know how to easily kill someone and not get haunted by it. Cydney doesn't think they are those kind of people and tells Cliff that they seem genuine and truly friendly, but Cliff just warns her to not let her guard down. Cydney tells him to enjoy himself and to not let some random homicide ruin their honeymoon. It starts pouring down rain, and they all decide to set up camp for the night, and Cliff has no idea what he is doing, so he has to have Nick be a man and help him set up their tent and campsite for the night. Nick hears something coming from the forest, but he just thinks it is a goat, and Cliff starts thinking it might be the killers. Nick tells Cliff that the murders didn't even happen on the island they are currently on, and they happened on the island over. Nick also tells Cliff to stop being so anxious and to help him find the goat so they can have dinner for the night. Nick and Cliff go looking through the jungle, and Nick tells him that he knows that Cliff thinks they could be the killers, and Nick says he thought the same about Cliff and Cydney. But he assures him they aren't the killers, and he doesn't believe they are either. Nick does tell Cliff that 2 people have been following them, and he wants to go find out who it is, and he needs Cliff's help just in case something goes down. Back at camp, Cydney and Gina are having a girl talk and telling each other about their lives and what they want. They both want to have kids, but Cydney has been trying for years now, and still no luck. She thinks Cliff might be shooting blanks, but she doesn't want to tell him and freak him out. Cliff and Nick are still walking through the forest, and they come across 2 people that have set up camp, and Cliff wonders if they are the people that have been following them. Cliff is about to confront them, but then out of nowhere, someone shows up behind him and scares the shit out of him. Turns out it was one of the excursion workers, and he had brought Cliff their permits as he left them in the shop, so no one actually stole them as he assumed. Cliff and Nick start heading back to the girls, and Nick actually sees a goat on the way, and he is able to kill it and bring it back to camp to eat for dinner. Cliff is very intimidated by how easy Nick made this look, and he knows that Nick is extremely trained with weapons and still suspects they might be the killers. The next morning, They wake up to a police helicopter that is yelling to lie down and put their hands behind their back. They have no idea who they are talking about until they see the helicopter land, and they are actually talking to Kale and Cleo, who are being arrested for the suspicion of murder. The cops search their stuff and they see missing teeth in a mint container, and they belong to the murder victims. Our two couples then breathe a sigh of relief as they can now put down any doubts that the other couple were the killers. They continue their hiking for the day, and the finishing point is a beach, so they put their equipment down and are going to relax for the rest of the day before having to head back. Cliff tells Nick that he rented a few kayaks for them to head out into a cave system nearby and do some exploring. Nick denies him at first, but eventually agrees to go. Gina grabs Cydney's camera so she can film them going out on the kayaks, and she sees something very ominous on the camera screen, and she immediately gets up and tries to get Nick's attention, but he can't hear her. Gina tries getting service on her phone to make a call, but it is a dead zone, and she sees a waterfall that she is going to go to the top of and try getting service on her phone. Cydney sees her running away and promptly follows her. Nick and Cliff reach their destination of the cave system, and then Cliff gives the big reveal and tries to shoot and kill Nick. We then see flashback, and Cliff and Cydney didn't actually get married at all, but they murdered the couple that really got married and stole their identities, and they plan on doing that to Nick and Gina next. A couple of murderers and identity thieves we are dealing with here. They purposely get to know the other couples and their lives, so it will be a lot easier to fake being them if they know important details about their livelihood. A flashback is then shown for Nick and Gina, and it turns out that Nick was about to propose to Gina once they reached the end of the trail. That is why Nick didn't want to go kayaking, because he was about to propose. But then Cliff convinced him to go, and Nick didn't think 30 minutes would make much of a difference. We also see that Cliff stashed the teeth in Kale's bag earlier and also sent in a tip how they were the killers, and that is why the police came and arrested them. Another flashback scene shows Cliff telling Cydney how they were going to pull off this most recent fraud scheme, but Cydney is starting to have second thoughts because she is actually getting to know Gina and she likes her. Cliff tells her that they can never wear the same face too long and they can't get caught up in caring for their victims or else they will go down. Back to the present, and Gina finds the cave that Cliff and Nick were in, and she leans over the edge to yell for Nick, and then she sees Cliff shoot him off of his kayak into the ocean. Gina screams and is about to jump in, but then Cydney shows up behind her and they start fighting with each other. Gina is able to get the upper hand, and she throws Cydney off of the cliff into the ocean down below. Gina starts looking everywhere for Nick, but she is having no luck. Gina then receives a phone call from her mobile company asking her to pay her bill, but she isn't concerned with that at the moment, and she begs him to call the police and send them to the island she is on. Cliff then pops up after climbing the cliff and fires a few bullets at Gina, but he misses. Gina then stabs Cliff's hand with a knife, and he is not very happy about it. Down at the cave system, Nick surprisingly isn't dead, and the bullet that Cliff shot at him hit him on the head, but in the exact spot where he has a metal plate embedded for prior injuries. He gets back on his kayak, and he is destined to go save his woman and then propose to her. Gina then sprints through the jungle where she is met by locals of the island, and she begs them for their help. Cliff shows up behind them, and he tries telling the guys that Gina is his wife, and she is just high on drugs and not to believe anything she says. They aren't buying his story at all, and he knows it, so he shoots them all dead at point-blank range. Nick then jumps down and knocks Cliff to the ground. Nick is about to shoot Cliff dead whenever a police helicopter with Cydney inside of it tells Nick to drop his gun. Gina then grabs Nick and tells him not to because the police will believe he is the killer. Cydney tells the police that all of the murders were done by Cliff, and he was blackmailing her to help him with it. The police then shoot Cliff dead, and the helicopter goes down to grab Nick and Gina to take him and get some medical care, and on the chopper, Nick finally proposes to Gina, and she says yes. And that is it for this one, friends. Thanks for watching.